Hello and welcome to a new Practical Sheets project. Today I want to start a personal finance management system. I'm no expert in personal finance, so I'm just going to go from my experience and we can modify it or optimize it in the way with your comments and with your experience and everything. It's just a suggestion or how we can log our financial data or day-to-day expenses, especially incomes and expenses, and then we can have a dashboard where we're going to easily see how we spend, maybe by categories, maybe by areas, maybe by month, by year, and all that. And then we can go a bit further and add budgets, incomes, savings, and investments and other things. Depends on how much you like it. We can start moving it along. So as always, we're going to need first our data. As I have told you in other videos, it is important to separate our data or our database from the ways in which we enter information. You can tell me, I prefer to enter it through a form or through an app or directly through Sheets. It doesn't matter. So first, let's try to do it as straight and as simple as possible, and then we can define in future videos what is your preferred way to add this data. This depends. This is very customizable. It depends on which are your needs, but let's say that if we start thinking in expenses, there are maybe some 5 or 6 mandatory fields that will work every time. First is the date in which the expense is made. Then is the value, how much, or the amount. Then we can have the detail of the expense detail or description. Let's first call it expenses. You can choose to have income and expenses in the same database or in the same table, or have it in two separate. It depends on you. But for now, we're going to focus in these first videos in expenses, and then we can add incomes and budgets and other things. So date, amount, description, and maybe we can have a category. And that's it. I think with these 4, we are good to go. Then we can have some, for example, if you're in a family, you can put which person of the family did the expense, or if you're in a team, you could also put the means of the transaction, if it was credit card, debit card, cash. We can have other things, but I think that with these 4, we're good to go. We can do some minor data validation, but I would recommend not to do very complex stuff, due to what I said earlier, that we can have some other methods of entering the information in further videos. But for now, we can have, let's say that the first method of inserting information will be directly through here. So we're going to do some very, very simple data validation. We're going to say that the date, it's going to be data validation. Just, we need this to be a date. I don't want to be so rigid, so I'm not going to reject the input. But the good thing about doing this date validation here is that if I do double click here, then I will have this small calendar to choose my dates. So this is very useful. Then the amount, just make sure there is a number. So we can also have a data validation, and just say there is a number greater than 0. Leave it equal. Maybe there's an expense in 0. I don't think so, but I don't know. Save. Also, let's not leave it rejecting it. And in category, we can have some pre-established categories that we could have in another sheet. Let's call this list. And let's say here we have some categories. For now, let's say there are 2 ways of doing this. We can have some predefined categories, or I can start putting my categories here depending on the expenses. This depends on you. Let's say that in expenses, normally we can have no more than 10 categories, but again, this is very personal. It's what I call personal finance. It depends on your situation, but let's say that normally we can say that our expenses can be divided in utilities or services, however you want to call it. Maybe living expenses, don't know, groceries, living or housing for your rent and all that. Maybe we could say loans, dining or going out, say hobbies, and we can have others. I don't recommend that much having others, because you're going to start inserting many things in other. But this is why we're going to have then a dashboard. So you can monthly look at your expenses and see, oh, I'm having a lot of things in others. So let's see if I need to add another category or something. So this is why I recommend this method of having these predefined categories, so that it makes you think and put it mandatory in some of these 6 to 7 categories. If not, you're going to have 50 different categories, and then it's going to be very difficult to track your spending. There are these many areas where you can classify your expenses. Okay? So we're just going to have a data validation. In lists, we're going to have this open, so we could add further categories if I want. Again, it's not recommended to have that many categories, but you can. It's up to you. Okay. Another field we could have, if you want, is a subcategory. For example, in going out, you can have dining, movies. It depends on if you're seeing that you're going out. It's 30% of your expenses, then you may want to know in which sub areas of these are you spending the most. So this is up to you again. Okay, so I think that we already have the data validation, and this is good. So we're going to start adding some expenses. So let's say that today I'm going to spend $10 coffee and a donut, and then I'm going to say this is going out. And then I bought some groceries yesterday for $35. And then here this will go in groceries. Another thing that, depending on your case, you may want is the establishment. Maybe you want to see if you bought in a Starbucks or in Apple or whatever, and because this may be useful to you. Again, I recommend to start with the minimum possible and then start adding new fields as you go. Because if you have 20 fields and you are not used to filling out this kind of data on a daily basis, then you're going to abandon the ship very quickly. But if it's just 3 or 4 things, then you're going to get used to. And then if you want to add 1 or 2, it's not a problem. But to start with 10 or 20 fields, it's going to give you a bit of hassle to continue entering the info. So this is just a personal recommendation. Let's add some other thing. Let's say that I pay my rent 5th, and this is, I don't know, 400, and then I have here living, and then I had to pay my loans. So on the 12th I paid $150 credit card. So this goes on loans. Let's have some other random stuff. So that's it, just some sample data. You can see that it's very easy to fill out the data. We just do double click, choose the date, just put the numbers. Here we can put whatever we want and then just choose a category. So it's very easy to fill out this form if you're in your computer. Even in the cell phone, it's not that difficult, but there are better ways to do it in your cell phone. Again, you could do it, that we could explore later. We could do it from a Google Form, from a Google app, from an AppSheet app, from a custom HTML form. We could do it in other ways. For now, this is the easiest way. So the second part of this first video, we're going to build a dashboard, a very simple dashboard, where we can see very easily how much we have spent and by category and all that. So let's add this dashboard. As in the entering of data, the dashboard can be done in a number of ways. We could do it here directly in Google Sheets. We can do it in an external program such as Google Data Studio. So we can explore this. We're going to do a simple one first here. So the first thing I want to know is how much money have I spent. This is where we start using formulas and functions. So the first one is the easiest function of them all, that is sum. we're just going to sum this B column with our function sum and the column B. It doesn't matter if we have text here, it just ignores the text. So this is it. I could put some format and it's very easily I can see how much I have spent. The next step is to see how much I have spent for each category. There are a number of ways of doing it. The simplest way is with a pivot table, but it's not my preferred. Let's start with the most simple way and then we can start adding some complexity. So let's go with a pivot table. We're going to stand here, go to data, pivot table, and then in existing sheet, I'm going to choose this A4 cell, okay? Perfect. And then what I'm going to, in the rows, I want my categories, and in my values, I want my amount. That's it. You can see that in a couple of clicks, you can see how much we have spent in any of this 4 categories. So we can add here, we could order descending, but based on the amount. So we can see what we spend the most and what we spend the least. We can add another thing, we can add again the amount here, but we can show it as a percentage of the column. So we can see of all my expenses, 30% is living, 25% is loans, 24% is groceries, 7% is hobbies, 7% is utilities, and 5% is going out. Again, very simple, and I could here change the title to whatever I want. So that's it. But there are some complications. The first one, let's say I'm going to replicate this, but for another month, for July. So let's change these dates. Everything will be, just for the sake of the example, July 7. Let's paste this here. So here, if I want total spent, this is the total spent, what I have spent my entire life since I start filling this data. So this is the first problem, that I cannot separate it by month. The second problem here, you can see it's not updating, so I need to do some things in my pivot table, but what I'm going to do is remove this pivot table and do it in other ways that I think are better. So I'm going to remove this pivot table. I just set my cell, my cursor in the first cell of the pivot table and just hit delete. That's it. So I don't want the total spent. Well, maybe I do want the total spent, but in this case we're going to do it month by month. This is a monthly expense control. So here I'm going to have a field called month, and I can do this in a number of ways. With the pivot table I erased, or with other formulas, manually we could, in the formula, extract the month from this date. But it's more complex. So the easiest way is to have another field called month and another field called year. But I'm not going to fill it manually, but with a formula. So the formula is, for the month, it's going to be text. What we're going to convert into text, this A2, with the following form. Just type 4Ms and it will give us the month name. We're not going to autofill. And the year is the same. Function year for this A2. That's it. I don't need anything else. I could drag this down to have the same formula, but the problem is that if I add new data, then I would have to, every time, drag this down and drag this down. So I prefer to do it with a thing called array formula. That may be a bit complex, but just copy what I'm doing here and it will work for you just fine forever. So this is a better way to have to drag this down. So what we're going to do is, instead of A2, I'm going to say A2 colon A. This means that we're going to do this formula for all our rows starting in the A2. Let's give it, and we're going to stand at the end of this formula and just give it Ctrl Shift or Command Shift Enter. This converts automatically to this array formula. Let's give it Enter. Let's go. Let's have some zoom out. And you can see that I don't have the need to drag down the formula. The thing is that I have this December that I don't like. So I can add a new condition. that says that, for example, if this column is empty, doesn't have anything, then just leave this month field empty. So inside my array formula, I'm just going to say that if A2, again, you have to use, if we're inside an array formula, we always have to use this notation, A2 column A, as if we were working with a range. If A2A equals to nothing, then just leave this field as nothing. And if it has something, then do my text formula. That's it. Let's go down, and you can see that we remove this December. And for year, I can do the same thing. We're just going to copy this and paste it here. And instead of text, we're going to, again, insert our year formula, but for A2 to A. That's it. And then we have also a year. We have the month and we have the year, and when we add a new expense, automatically, without having to drag down or doing anything, I have my month and my year. Okay, perfect. So now that we have our month, we could have here a data validation again, so we can choose the month. I don't want to choose January if I don't have expenses in January. So I'm going to choose from this list of months. So here, give a right click, go to data validation, list from a range. My range is going to be here in expenses this month, starting in E2 and going down to E. So I have all of my data taken into account. To save, and here I have my months. The month where I have some expenses. Given that right now I only have 1 year, I don't need to have a year, but it would be good to start thinking that this will be something I'm going to use for years and years to come. So again, I'm going to do a year, and here I'm going to change my data validation to not expenses E to E, but FE, F to F, where I have my year. That's it. So I have 2021, and I have my months. And then in the future, I could do a dependent drop down, because maybe in 2021, I just have data for 2 months, and in 2022 I have another 2 months. So when I choose 2021, that in this drop down I want to have only the months of 2021, but I will leave this. So let's move this down. What I want here is to add only the data from this month and this year. This I'm going to do it with a formula called SUMIFs. SUMIFs ask me, what do you want to add? I say, I'm going to add this amount. And then you say, okay, with which criteria? Say the first criteria is the year. I want the year to be this year. Okay, and second, I want the month, this E column, to be the same, to match this month. Let's close our SUMIFs and let's give it enter. And if I go to July, well, because it's the same value, but because I just copied, but I can change this 15 and 45 and 400, this 140 and this 100, whatever. So in July now I have 1416, and in August 1356, and in September just 22. Okay, now I want the other part, the categories. There are a couple of ways we can do it. We can do it with a query, but I don't want to go too deep in that right now, so I'm going just to go with a unique. This formula I'm going to bring the categories, but only one, without repeating. So I'm going to stand here in D2 and go up to D, to any data we may have, and close it. So here I have my categories. The bad thing about doing it this way is that I cannot order it. So this order we can do it in some other ways. For now, we could do it with again, I don't want to go into deep inquiries or something like that. So we're just going to have here the category, and here we're going to have expense. And this we could do it again with a SUMIF. So actually it's this same SUMIF, but I'm going to block all these references. So I'm going to select all the function, go with F4, And you can see that we have this symbol. This means that even if I copy and paste the formula, it will always refer to the same. Okay, so I'm going to do that, copy and paste, but I'm going to add a new criteria in my SUMIFS. So if you remember, I said sum only if you're in the year 2021, if you're in September, but now I'm going to say do the sum only if but the category here in the column D matches going out. Okay, so this is the thing it's missing. So here in the D column, let's block it again with the for is the same as this going out. So this I'm not going to block it because I wanted to drag it down. So when I drag down the formula, it works here in groceries, in living, in loans, etc. So let's give it enter. Let's drag it down. Here I have 0 because I'm in September. Let's go to August. And you can see that I have the expenses for everything. Actually, there is a way to order this in an advanced manner, but I'll leave this for another video. One last thing I'm going to show you is a bit more advanced, and is I want to see, for example, again, I'm missing one thing, the percentage participation. So I'm just have to do this divided by this total. Let's block the total. Let's autofill. And let's change this to percentage. Let's imagine that I have, I don't know, here in hobbies, in August, I bought a lot of things. So I see that my hobbies is 25%. So I want to know in a monthly basis why I spend 25%. So I needed to go here and do a filter. So it would be good to have in my dashboard a very simple thing to see how much I spent in the detail of these hobbies. So we're going to have here a very simple thing. We're going to have a drop down of the category, as we have done, data validation, from this category up to D. And then I can choose from my categories, and what I'm going to do is have a filter function that filters my expenses by, again, similar to what we did with the SUMIFS. It's going to filter the detail of my expenses, but depending on some restrictions or criteria. So what I want in my filter, it may be all this if I want, all this, maybe without the month and the year, but change this later. And we're going to give some conditions. The conditions are framed a bit different from the SUMIFS. I'm going to show you how. So the first condition will be again the year. So this expense FF is equal to a year. The second one will be my month. That my month is equal to this one. The third one, it's going to be the category. That the category is equal to this one. That's it. Give it enter. And here you can see my detail of my $426 in hobbies. And if you go to going out, I can see the details of going out. And if I go to utilities, I can see the detail of utilities. Let's add my headers. So that's it. This is my dashboard. It doesn't look very nice. I could add some graphs. I could here have this in a pie chart, or I could have this in a bigger, I could rearrange this in a more visually interesting way. You could have this total in a bigger font, in a color, some fields. We can leave this for a second video. I just wanted to show you very easily. You can track your expenses and have a dashboard to see month by month how your expenses moved along, see the detail for category. It's not very complex. We can add some complexity in 3 ways. First, in the ways we enter the data. Second, in the amount of data we need. We could add here the fields you want. And third, in how you want to show the data. You can add a lot of graphs, a lot of more info, but it depends on you, and we can, depending on your suggestions, we can start moving this along and doing a more robust system. So, thank you so much for watching. You'll find the template file in the Patreon page. And if you like this kind of videos, just subscribe, and you need to not only click in subscribe, but also in the the little bell at the right of subscribe so you can have notifications when new videos appear. Thank you so much again, and see you next time.